Hello, Tributes, and welcome to my first original Discord Hunger Games. Now, before I start, I'd like to thank a few people, as well as explain myself for why I put original instead of just saying first Discord Hunger Games. So the people I would like to thank are Andrew McLean for giving some of the art, for making some of the art used in this slideshow, this video. I'd also like to thank Christian Blanco and Lauren, who wrote Tales of the Hunger Games and Panem Reborn, respectively. I would also like to thank everybody who participated in this first original Discord Hunger Games. I have no clue everybody who participated. I don't even remember who made the victor. But in a few of these future ones, I will remember who made the victor, and I'll be able to be like, oh yeah, that's who made it. Thank you to that person for participating. But I'm never gonna be able to remember all the people who participated. But just thank you to all those people. Now, another thing before I start, the reason why I specifically said this is the original Discord Hunger Games is because I've restarted it. I've made a whole new server. The first Discord Hunger Games Reapings have not started yet in that new server because there's not a lot of people in there. So, if you want to join it, link will be in the description if I remember. So yeah. With all that being said, I hope you guys enjoy. Also, one more thing, I was not that good at writing when I wrote this, so just keep that in mind. Like, it's kind of rushed a little bit, because I wasn't that good, at making good stuff, but just, it's a video, it's a script, just, let me just get started without wasting any more of your time. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the video. After the 600th Hunger Games, the president at that time ended the Hunger Games for what she thought would be forever. 1,000 years after the Hunger Games was ended, a young capital citizen by the name of Bacchus Leto finds a journal that someone had written about the Hunger Games long ago, and Bacchus thought it'd be a good idea to bring back the Hunger Games. Bacchus ran for president alongside a capital boy named Levi Vesta. The votes were close, but the votes still ended up in the favor of Bacchus. After Bacchus won, he made this announcement. "Hello, citizens of Panem. I'm Bacchus Leto, your new president." He pauses for cheers. "The first thing I want to do as president is bring back a much-beloved thing by the capital, the Hunger Games." He pauses for cheers again. "Reapings for the first annual Hunger Games will begin early tomorrow morning, so be ready, district citizens." And with that, Bacchus signed off, leaving all the districts in fear. Some citizens ran away with their youths to the safety of the South, and some stayed in their home district and just hoped and prayed that they wouldn't be reaped. And some people, especially people from the career districts, wanted to go into the games. District 12. District 12 had barely any people attending the reaping, with just 3 boys and a scarce 2 girls. Bacchus walks over to the female reaping bowl and picked out a name. Haley Ashfield, age 16. When no one answered to this name, he repeated it twice before picking a new name. This happened 15 times before Bacchus finally picked out the name of 17-year-old Ashlyn Asher. Ashlyn was known as the prettiest girl in the district. Her long, curly, light brown hair flowed in the wind as she teared up. Ashlyn started to slowly walk down the aisle, tears rushing down her face like a waterfall. She didn't want to go into the games and possibly die. When she got onto the stage, she shook hands with Bacchus and stood to his left. As Bacchus walked over to the male reaping bowl, heavy breathing was heard from the male enclosure. Batches gave the boys a menacing look before picking out a name. Cole Williams, aged 18. When Cole heard his name, he put on his as menacing of a face as he could muster. Cole was not the strongest boy in the district, but he sure wasn't the weakest, especially not of the 3 male youths that could have been reaped. Cole slowly walked up to the stage, and when he arrived, he shook hands with Batches, and instead of shaking hands with Ashlyn, he kissed her hand. After this, Ashlyn and Cole were announced to be District 12's tributes for this year. District 11. Just like District 12, District 11 barely had anyone come to the reaping. District 11 only had 10 boys and 1 girl attend the reaping. The one girl that was there walked up to the stage before Batches could even call out a name. "Hey, get back to your enclosure," Batches yelled at the girl. "We all know I'm gonna be the female tribute." The girl snapped back, and Batches couldn't really argue with the words he was being presented with were fact. What's your name, little girl?" Batches asked the girl. "I'm Philodendra Cass. I'm 15 years old." Philodendra said to Batches before getting onto the stage and shaking his hand. After the reaping of Philodendra, Batches walked over to the male reaping bull and picked out a name. Bloom Rambu, age 17. Bloom looked up from the ground and glared at Batches. Bloom was a relatively attractive young man. He had a very distinctive haircut with his brown hair going over one of his eyebrows. When Bloom entered the aisle, a smile from Batches as Batches saw Bloom's big frame. Bloom slowly yet intimidatingly walked down the aisle. When he made it onto the stage, Bloom reluctantly shook hands with Batches and shook hands with Philodendra. After this, Philodendra and Bloom were announced this year's tributes for District 11. District 10. When Batches arrived in District 10, he was visibly tired. District 10, just like the previous 2 districts, had barely anyone come to the reaping. Only 2 boys and 5 girls came to the reaping. When Batches walked over to the female reaping bowl, he could see the 2 girls in the enclosure crossing their fingers, hoping and praying to God that they don't get picked. But one of these girls is gonna be reaped and have their dreams crushed. When Batches arrived at the female reaping bowl, he picked out a name. Vivian Skinner, age 14. When her name was called, Vivian screamed louder than she ever had before. Vivian slowly walked over to the aisle. She was terrified, but she knew the other girl wouldn't volunteer, so she had to go onto the stage. She walked onto the stage and shook hands with Batches. Batches then went over to the male reaping bowl and picked out a name. Kit Barrow, age 18. When Kit heard his name, he started to slowly walk over to the aisle. He didn't want to go, but he had to. He hasn't always been known as the fearless kind. He had to prove them wrong. He had to show that he could be fearless when it truly counted. He walked up onto the stage and glared at Batches, and he didn't even shake hands with Batches. After this, Vivian and Kit were announced this year's tributes for District 10. District 10. Like the previous 3 districts, or District 9. Like the previous 3 districts, District 9 barely had anyone show up for the reaping, but still had the most people show up out of all the outer districts. 10 girls and 5 boys came to District 9's reaping. Batches was napping in the train, so a peacekeeper volunteered to read the tributes' names. The peacekeeper then walked over to the female reaping bowl and picked out a name. Maisie Jones, age 12. When her name was called, Maisie fell to her knees and started to cry. Peacekeepers forced Maisie to her feet and pushed her to rush her to the stage. When Maisie still didn't walk faster, a peacekeeper pushed her again, and Maisie fell to the ground and hit her nose on the ground, causing it to bleed. This was the last straw for Maisie's brother Wolf. Wolf ran at the peacekeeper that pushed Maisie and tackled him to the ground. Wolf threw a few good punches before being pulled off of the peacekeeper, and to punish Wolf, he was forced to be the male tribute for District 9. After this eventful reaping, Maisie and Wolf were announced this year's tributes for District 9. District 8. Much like the previous districts, District 8 had very few people attend the reaping. District 8 had only 2 boys and 2 girls attend, although this district still wasn't the one with the least reaping attendance. That honor goes to District 6. At this point, Batches had gotten sleep and was able to reap this district's tributes. Batches went over to the female reaping bowl and picked out a name. Cordelia Isignata, age 15. When Cordelia's name was called, she didn't hear it. The girl next to her had to use sign language to tell her that she was reaped. It was later revealed that Cordelia was deaf. When Cordelia was told she was reaped, she cried as she made her way to the stage. When she got onto the stage, she shook hands with Batches. As Batches walked over to the male reaping bowl, he eyed down both the males in the enclosure. When Batches arrives at the bowl, he picked out a name. Patch Pudgy, age 15. When Patch's name was called, the camera zoomed in on a tiny boy with silvery hair and green eyes. Immediately, the Capitol liked this kid's aesthetic. Patch walked into the aisle without a tear in his eyes. He walked down the aisle in a way that could only be described as proper. When he got to the stage, he politely shook hands with Batches. After this, Cordelia and Patch were announced this year's tributes for District 8. District 7. Unlike all the previous districts, District 7 barely had any of its youths leave the district, so a lot of youths were at the reaping. When Batches arrived, he was pleased about this change. As Batches walked over to the female reaping bowl, he checked out some of the older youths and even gave 18-year-old Jideen Prass the eye. When he arrived at the female reaping bowl, he picked out a name. Jideen Prass, age 18. When Jideen heard her name, she walked out into the aisle and strutted down the aisle. When Jideen arrived on the stage, Batches offered his hand, but Jideen just grabbed Batches' hand and pulled him into a kiss before standing to his left. After this slightly awkward reaping, Batches walked over to the male reaping bowl and picked out a name. Sprout Vinbruch, age 18. When Sprout's name was called, he looked around for volunteers. But when no volunteers came to the forefront, Sprout knew he needed to go. Sprout walked out into the aisle and Batches smiled at his big frame. Sprout's muscles bulged out of his shirt. He was one of the stronger boys in the district. When he got up to the stage, he shook hands with Batches. After this, Jideen and Sprout were announced this year's tributes for District 7. District 6. Like Districts 8 through 12, District 6 had barely anyone come to the reaping. This district had the record for the least amount of youths to attend the reaping. This district only had 1 boy and 1 girl attend the reaping. The one girl was 17-year-old Lexus Ford. Lexus was known for being the most attractive girl in the district, maybe in all of Panem. Lexus was a stripper in the only strip club in the district. The one boy was 17-year-old Octo Clearflame. Octo was known as one of the smartest District 6 citizens, only being beaten out by his dad. After the pretty uneventful reaping, Lexus and Octo were announced this year's tributes for District 6. District 5. District 5 had quite a few people leave after the announcement, but still had a lot of youths left. When Batches arrived, he was clearly drunk, and when he walked over to the female reaping bowl, he almost knocked it over, causing laughter in the enclosures. Batches simply sighed and picked out a name from the female reaping bowl. Alizia Willems, age 14. When Alizia heard her name, she fell to her knees in tears and didn't even get up when a peacekeeper tried to force her up. She finally got up when her best friend helped her up and walked her out to the aisle. Alizia slowly walked down the aisle and onto the stage. Alizia didn't shake hands with Batches, though. Batches simply sighed and walked over to the male reaping bowl and picked out a name. Renegade Ayala, age 17. When Renegade heard his name, he walked out into the aisle, and when a peacekeeper walked over to him to escort him down the aisle, Renegade punched the peacekeeper and said, "I can walk down the aisle on my own, you asshole." Renegade then walked down the aisle without a peacekeeper to escort him. When he got onto the stage, Batches offered his hand, but instead of shaking Batches' hand, Renegade punched Batches in the face, causing peacekeepers to knock Renegade unconscious. After this, Alizia and Renegade were announced this year's tributes for District 5. District 4. District 4 is a career district, so when the announcement was made that the Hunger Games were coming back, no one left the district. When Batches arrived in this district, he was happy to see all the youths in this district. Most of the youths were super attractive, especially the girls. Batches walked over to the female reaping bowl and picked out a name. Ariel Mast, age 17. When Ariel heard her name, she smirked and walked out into the aisle. Ariel was the most attractive girl in the district, with her blonde hair and piercing teal eyes. When Ariel arrived on the stage, she offered her hand to Batches, and Batches kissed her hand. After this, Batches walked over to the male reaping bowl and picked out a name. Benji Alexander, age 18. When Benji heard his name get called, he ran into the aisle and down the aisle to the stage. And when he got onto the stage, he turned around and flexed his muscles at the crowd. He then shook Batches' hand. After this reaping, Ariel and Benji were announced this year's tributes for District 4. District 3. Like the outer districts, District 3 had barely anyone attend this reaping. They only had 3 girls and 2 boys attend. When Batches arrived, he wished that this district would be the last district with barely anyone at the reaping. Batches walked over to the female reaping bowl and picked out a name. Barbara Bailey, age 14. When Barbara heard her name, she ran out into the aisle and tried to run away, but peacekeepers blocked her way and forced her to walk to the stage. When she wouldn't stop trying to break through the peacekeepers, they were forced to knock her unconscious and carry her to the stage. When the peacekeepers got onto the stage with Barbara, Batches walked over to the male reaping bowl and picked out a name. Charlie Watts, age 12. When Charlie heard his name, he tried the same thing Barbara tried and was a little more successful, although it ended in the same way it did when Barbara tried it. After this reaping, Barbara and Charlie were announced this year's tributes for District 3. District 2. Just like District 4, District 2 is a career district, so no one left the district when the Hunger Games announcement happened. 5 girls and 10 boys volunteered for the reaping games. For the girls, only one stood out among all else. This was 18-year-old Elena Cleaver. Elena knocked girls out before ripping off their bracelets. When it was just her and the final girl, Elena bashed the other girl's head against a rock several times, But she didn't stop after the girl went unconscious. She didn't stop until she saw the final girl's blood, and then Elena ripped off the final girl's bracelets, making Elena the District 2 female tribute. Meanwhile, for the boys, 2 boys stood out. These 2 were Ajax Hilton and Elena's little brother, Maximus Cleaver. Maximus was the only 17-year-old boy out of the entire mud pit, which was filled with 18-year-olds. The last 2 boys standing were Ajax and Maximus. Maximus grabbed Ajax's head in between his hands and started to crush Ajax's head between his hands until Ajax took off his own bracelet and screamed, "I yield!" After this, Maximus became the male District 2 tribute. District 1. Much like Districts 2 and 4, District 1 is a career district, but unlike the other 2 career districts, some citizens still ran away, and only 28 youths stayed in the district. 14 girls and 2 boys volunteered for the talent show. A girl named Lucia Beckett stood out the most out of all the girls. Lucia shot a bow and arrow at small targets with perfect accuracy, and then halfway through her showcase, she put on a blindfold and shot arrows at an apple that was placed atop a peacekeeper's head. She missed 3 times. Thankfully, she didn't shoot the peacekeeper, but she finally hit the apple on the 4th try. She won 70% of the votes and became the female District 1 tribute. Meanwhile, the 2 boys were both pretty good. A little boy at the age of 15 named Alec Beckett threw spears at slightly bigger targets than Lucia's, while an 18-year-old boy named Alexander Nicolai threw knives at tiny little targets and hit all of them with perfect accuracy. Halfway through Alexander's display, he blindfolded himself and threw knives at the same targets, and he only missed 1 before hitting the rest right in the bullseye. Alexander won 51% of the votes, making him the male District 1 tribute by the skin of his teeth. Training. In the training center, Wolf and Maisie hung out with Octo and Lexus in the survival station. The 4 immediately struck up a bond, and after just a few minutes, they had already agreed to ally with each other. Wolf and Maisie were happy that they had some allies in the arena, and so were Octo and Lexus. Soon, Charlie from 3 approaches the group and looks back over at the electric station and smirks. At that point, the group of the D6 and D9 tributes were intrigued at what Charlie was smirking at. They looked over at the electric station and saw a very intricate wire system built by Charlie. Soon, they see Elena from 2 go into the electric station and try to dismantle the electric system, but she got electrocuted and she falls to the ground. Peacekeepers soon enter the training center and grab Elena to take her to the hospital. Elena was pronounced dead the next day. After what Charlie had done, most tributes were scared of him except for Wolf, Octo, Maisie, and Lexus. The group asked Charlie to join them, to which he happily accepted. Charlie was happy that he was going to be around a tribute with his own age. Meanwhile, in the Spear Station, the District 11 tributes hung out over there with Maximus there. Maximus made fun of the District 11 tributes whenever they missed a target and acted like he was scared whenever they hit one. Philodendra was starting to get really annoyed with Maximus and threw a spear towards him. She wasn't trying to hit Maximus, but with her bad aim, she hit Maximus right in the forehead, killing him on impact, making it so that the entirety of the District 2 tributes were dead before the games even began. Meanwhile, the careers, Districts 1, 2, and 4, or at least what was left of them, met up and talked about how the District 2 tributes were so dumb in order to let the other tributes kill them before the games had even begun. Ariel stayed in the spear station on her own. Whenever she would hear other tributes talk about who would be the next career to go, Ariel would just roll her eyes and continue practicing her spear throwing. The more and more Ariel heard the other tributes talk badly about the careers, the more and more she wanted to express the urge to kill. The more and more she had to repress the urge to kill. She kept thinking, if I hear one more person talk bad about me or the other careers, I'm gonna scream. Meanwhile, Lucia, Alexander, and Benji hung out in the sword station with Barbara from 3. The careers were surprised with how good Barbara was with a sword. Eventually, the careers invited Barbara to join the careers, and she gratefully accepted, although she would later come to find out this was a mistake. Bloodbath. The tributes were lifted into the arena on podiums. They were all pretty terrified of what would happen in the arena. They all had no idea what to expect after true tributes died before the games had even begun. The arena this year was a rocky cliffside, standing over some water. All the tributes thought the arena was beautiful, but the careers knew not to let its beauty distract them. When the gong sounded, the careers, Wolf, Octo, Maisie, Charlie, Lexus, Ilizzy, Cordelia, Vivian, Ashlyn, and Cole ran into the cornucopia. Benji grabbed a spear and immediately threw it at Wolf, but Wolf ducked under it as he was being chased by Cordelia, causing Cordelia to be hit by the spear instead. Wolf, Octo, Charlie, Lexus, and Maisie split up and grabbed supplies before running away from the cornucopia. This group ran quickly into the forest, and as they continued to run, they heard cannons, probably from cornucopia kills. These kills were later shown to be Vivian from 10, Cole from 12, and Ashlyn from 12. Day 1. Octo yells at Charlie for what he did, saying, You killed a District 2 tribute. Thanks to you, we're probably getting targeted. Octo snapped. I'm sorry, Charlie said while tears were rushing down his face. Stop, Octo, Wolf interjected. Can't you see he's feeling bad enough already? Octo sighs. Fine, I'm sorry for yelling at you, kid. I'm just scared. Octo apologizes to Charlie. It's okay. Charlie sniffles. Just please don't do it again, Octo says to Charlie, and Charlie responds with a nod. Meanwhile, Philodendra and Bloom heard the fight that Octo and Charlie were having and started following the noises. Philodendra and Bloom snuck into a bush near the group and thought of a plan of attack. After the bloodbath, the careers wanted to go look for other tributes, but Barbara wanted to stay at the cornucopia. It's safe here, Barbara said to the careers. Who gives a shit about safe? Ariel replied. We should, Barbara yelled. You're coming with us to look for other tributes or you die. Ariel got up close and personal with Barbara. Canon. Meanwhile, back with the 11s, they also started to hear the ensuing argument between the careers. Already? Philodendra whispered to Bloom. I guess so, Bloom replied, also in a whispered tone. Little did they know, Kit from 10 was sneaking up behind them. Kit took out a makeshift sword he made with a tree branch and sliced it across Philodendra's neck, and this put Bloom at full alert. He dodged Kit's attacks with relative ease, but Kit's grunts alerted Wolf and his allies to the threat behind the bush. They immediately grabbed their weapons and stood by Bloom's side and actually helped Bloom take down Kit. After this all went down, the group still heard Barbara and Ariel arguing. "Fine, I'll go," Barbara finally said after her life was threatened a total of 6 times by all the different careers. "Good, let's roll," Lucia said, taking the lead away from Ariel. After Lucia took the lead, Ariel got mad, but didn't do anything about it, just clenching her fists. Night 1. Alexander noticed Ariel clenching her fists when Lucia took the lead, but decided he would wait until the night to do anything about it. Alexander snuck away from the careers and found his way to his secret ally, Dryadine Prass. When he found her, Dryadine and him came up with a plan to take out Ariel. Meanwhile, Ilizzy and Renegade are sleeping in shifts, and they hear a twig snap behind them. Luckily for them, it was the Arena Mutt, a friendly wolf. At first, Ilizzy and Renegade were terrified, but they soon realized that these wolves were friendly, and they were the first tributes to run into them. Canon. Meanwhile, back with Dryadine and Alexander, sneak back to the career camp and see their intended target. Luckily for them, the career that was taking watch, Benji, knew Alexander's plan and also hated Ariel, so he did nothing to stop it. Dryadine stays at watch at the cornucopia's edge while Alexander snuck over to Ariel. Alexander then woke Ariel up and started to fight with her. Alexander finally grabbed Ariel in a chokehold and whispered in her ear, "I never liked you." And with that, Alexander snapped Ariel's neck and ran away back into the surrounding forest with Dryadine. Day 2. After that night, Wolf decided to leave the camp and look for other tributes with his alliance. At first, Maisie and Charlie were reluctant about leaving, but they soon agreed. They looked all over the place until they found Patch from 8 and Sprout from 7. Bloom led the assaults on Sprout, followed closely by Wolf and Octo. Meanwhile, the girls and Charlie ran at Patch. Meanwhile, with the careers, Lucia was the first to wake up and notice Ariel dead. "Benji, get your ass up." "You too, Barbara." Lucia raised her voice at the two. "Who did this? Which one of y'all did this?" Lucia snapped. We needed her, and one of y'all killed her." "Who did it?" Lucia, calm down. "It wasn't us," Benji replied. "It was Wolf and those stupid second careers. I think they refer to themselves as," Benji says in a tone of confirmation. "I'm gonna end them," Lucia yelled. Canon. Meanwhile, back with Wolf and his group, Bloom, Wolf, and Octo grab their swords. Bloom slices at Sprout's left leg, rendering it useless. Octo sliced at Sprout's right leg, rendering it useless, and then Wolf performed the killing blow, while the girls and Charlie are attacking Patch. Meanwhile, Maisie and Charlie stayed back as Lexus attacked Patch. Lexus managed to get Patch in a chokehold as Wolf, Octo, and Bloom came up to them to help. "Snap his neck," Bloom yelled. When Bloom yelled this, it kinda scared the others, but Lexus did what she was told and snapped Patch's neck. Night 2. Later that night, Charlie, Octo, Lexus, and Maisie sneak away from Wolf and Bloom to talk about them. "Bloom kind of freaked me out with what she said earlier," Maisie said to the group. Well, Wolf is the one who suggested we should go after tributes, Lexus replied. Don't talk about my brother like that, Maisie snapped. Yeah? Don't talk about her brother like that, Charlie butts in. Don't you ever blame my brother, you bitch, Maisie said again. Or what, bitch? Lexus replied. At this point, both Octo and Charlie were frozen in fear and anticipation of who would strike first. Meanwhile, with Alizé and Renegade, they were becoming great friends with the wolf pack they found. Every night, Alizé would take the wolves to go to get water while Renegade hunted for food for them and the wolves. Cannon. Or what, bitch? Lexus screamed. Maisie just stood there. Don't call me a bitch again, Lexus said to Maisie. Or what? Maisie asked. You really want to know? Lexus asked, and Maisie just nods. After this nod, Lexus grabs Maisie in a chokehold and starts to squeeze. Maisie scratches at Lexus's arm, begging for air that was not given to her. Bloom, Wolf, she yelled as loud as she could. Help, she yelled out again. After no help came, she lost hope, and at that point she also lost all her air and died in Lexus's arms. Octo covered his mouth while Charlie cried, Don't any of you call me a... She was stopped by a spear being thrown into her back. This spear was thrown by a crying wolf. Wolf ran over to Maisie's dead body and continued to cry over her. Everyone looked at Wolf, feeling bad for him, especially Octo. If only I would have done something, Octo said to Wolf. It's not your fault, Wolf replied. Octo walked over to Wolf and rubbed his back. Even later that night, Charlie and Octo snuck away from Wolf and Bloom. Charlie, I gotta ask you something, Octo said to Charlie. What is it? Charlie replied. Did you agree with Maisie on her stances with Bloom, or did you agree with Lexus on her stances with Wolf? Octo asked. I still don't trust Bloom, Charlie replied. Me neither, Charlie. Me neither, Octo replied. We need to get rid of him, Charlie said. I have an idea, Octo said, and went on to whisper his plan into Charlie's ear. Cannon. Meanwhile, the careers are still out looking for Wolf and his group when they come across Alizé and the wolves drinking in a pond. Lucia smirked at Barbara and Benji before sneaking up behind Alizé. Lucia then proceeded to slit Alizé's throat. After this, an announcement was made. Congratulations on making it to the top 10. Everyone looked around in surprise. Tomorrow morning, there will be a feast held at the cornucopia. The cornucopia will be stocked with bags full of things that you all may need in the future. Good luck, tributes, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Then the announcement ended. Cannon. Meanwhile, back with Octo and Charlie, they decided to wait until both Wolf and Bloom were asleep to kill Bloom. When Wolf finally fell asleep, Charlie and Octo put their plan into effect. Octo snuck up on Bloom while Charlie kept watch. Octo then quietly slit Bloom's throat and ran away from Wolf with Charlie. Day 3. Wolf woke up early in the morning and realized that Bloom was dead, and Octo and Charlie were missing. He immediately correctly suspected Octo and Charlie were behind Bloom's death. I'm gonna end them, he said to himself. But before he could get up and leave, he was lifted up out of his sleeping area and turned around to look into the eyes of Lucia from one. Found ya, Lucia said in excitement to Wolf. Shit, Wolf muttered to himself. He's scared now, Benji yells in excitement. Wolf spits at Benji. I ain't scared of shit, Wolf said it to Benji. After Wolf did this, Benji ran at him. Benji punched Wolf's face until all that was left was blood. After this, Barbara pulled Benji off of Wolf. "Let Lucia handle him," Barbara said to Benji, and Benji just glared at Barbara. Meanwhile, with Renegade realized that Ilizzy hadn't returned with the wolf pups since last night. Where is she? Renegade thought to himself. He finally came to the realization that Ilizzy was dead. Those damn careers, Renegade yelled. I swear, Renegade teared up. Those damn careers killed Ilizzy and the wolves. Renegade began to cry until he heard footsteps from behind a tree. It was Octo and Charlie. Go ahead, end me. Ilizzy's dead, I got nothing at home for me. Renegade yelled into the forest. Renegade? Octo asked. Octo? Renegade asked. Just then, Octo and Charlie came out of the trees. Renegade! Octo ran at him and hugged him. I thought I'd never find you, Octo said in excitement. I thought the same, Renegade said. Who's this? Charlie asked. I put together a secret alliance with the Fives just in case something like this happened, Octo replied to Charlie. Canon. Meanwhile, back with Wolf and the careers, Lucia had finally had enough with the torture. She grabbed Wolf in a chokehold. You killed Ariel, Lucia yelled, and Benji got scared that Alexander would be caught. At this point, Wolf couldn't say anything because he was fastly running out of air. In just a minute, Wolf was dead in Lucia's arms. Meanwhile, with Alexander and Dryadine talked with each other about life in their respective districts. After a while of talking, Alexander kissed Dryadine. After this kiss, Alexander and Dryadine became intimate, and the camera switched back to Octo, Renegade, and Charlie. Charlie sat and thought. We're in the top 10. What happens if we're the top 3? Charlie asked Renegade and Octo. I don't know yet. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Octo replied to Charlie. If we're in the top 3, I'd let you get the victory, Charlie, Renegade said to Charlie. You deserve it. Plus he's only 12. He shouldn't have to die, Octo said to Renegade. Renegade, Octo, you don't have to do that, Charlie said to Renegade and Octo. Yes, we do, Renegade and Octo replied. Canon. Meanwhile, back with the careers, Benji waited for Lucia and Barbara to fall asleep to make his move. They were in the top 10. It was now or never. Benji snuck over to Lucia first and snapped her neck quietly in the night. Then he snuck over to Barbara and woke her up. Hey Barbara, you should come look at this, Benji said to Barbara with a slight smirk. Barbara gets up and walks over to where Benji was leading her and saw Lucia's body. Before Barbara could realize it was Benji who killed her, Benji snapped Barbara's neck. Now it's down to the top 6. Alexander from 1, Charlie from 3, Benji from 4, Renegade from 5, Octo from 6, and Dryadine from 7. The feast. Everyone in the arena needed something from the feast, so everyone ran to the cornucopia. Benji immediately ran to the District 4 bag and grabbed it, and then grabbed the District 1 and District 3 bags as well. As Charlie saw Benji grab his bag, Octo ran in. Octo took out a sword, and Benji prepared his fist to punch him. Octo swung his sword at Benji, but Benji ducked and punched Octo with a right hook, causing Octo's nose to bleed. Octo wiped the blood from his nose and swiped his sword at Benji again, and this time it hit right into the side of his head. But it wasn't Benji's head. Charlie! Renegade yelled from across the opening. Octo looked at Charlie, then at Benji, who was just as terrified, and then at Renegade. and then down at the ground and started to tear up. "What have I done?" Octo asked himself in between sobs. Benji then ran off with the bags, but before running off, he gave the District 3 bag to Renegade, and then ran off. At this point, Octo didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, with Dryadine and Alexander, they were walking to the cornucopia when they heard Charlie's cannon. "Wow, the careers must really be going hard," Dryadine said to Alexander. Or one of the careers were killed. Or one of the careers were killed. Alexander said to Dryadine. "That's true," Dryadine said to Alexander. Well, when they got to the cornucopia, they saw Octo standing there next to Charlie's body. "Oh God," Alexander muttered to himself. "Holy shit," he yelled as they saw something truly horrific. Cannon. "Octo, what have you done?" Renegade asked. Octo starts to cry and grabs his sword out of Charlie's head. "Holy shit." Octo hears Alexander yell from across the field, but it was too late. Octo slit his own throat with his own sword. "No!" Renegade yelled as he ran into the forest. Renegade continued to run until he tripped and fell off of a cliff and into some water where hungry sharks were waiting to eat him up. Now we're down to the top 3. Alexander from 1, Benji from 4, and Dryadine from 7 are among them. Final battle. In no time at all, Benji was back at the cornucopia with Alexander and Dryadine. Dryadine took out her axe, while Alexander took out his sword and Benji took out his trident. Everyone had the weapon they were best with. It was all or nothing. Benji threw his trident at Alexander, but Alexander ducked under it, and instead, the trident hit Dryadine in the leg. "Ow, shit," she yells before throwing her axe at Benji, hitting him in the stomach. Cannon. After killing Benji, it was just her and Alexander. "Alex, wait. Don't kill me," Dryadine said to Alexander. "Why not?" Alexander asked. "I'm pregnant, Alex," Dryadine says to Alexander. "Oh," Alexander says to Dryadine. "Well, I want you to survive and take care of our kid for me, okay?" Alexander asked Dryadine. "I hope there's a heaven up there for you, Alex. Maybe we could meet up again up there when I go," Dryadine said to Alexander, and Alexander just smiled and nodded. Alexander then continued to drop his sword and give Dryadine her axe. "Good luck. Let's hope our baby isn't as bad as I was." Alexander laughs, and then Dryadine swings her axe into Alexander's head. After this, Dryadine cried as a hovercraft came to pick her up. So yeah, that is the end of the first original Discord Hunger Games. I can gladly say I've gotten better since then at writing. So this new Discord Hunger Games hopefully will not be as bad as that one. But so there'll be a lot more focusing on all of the characters pretty much, instead of just focusing on a select few. Because I don't think I ever focused on any of the D6 tributes, any of the D10 tributes in this game specifically. Of course, later on down the line I did focus on a lot more of the tributes, but still not all of them. But I've gotten better at POV tributes and not making it as obvious who's gonna be the victor, because I think it was pretty obvious who the victor might have been. It could have been one of Wolf's allies. It wasn't, but it could have. It could have been Benji, could have been Alexander or Dryadine, because you saw a lot more of them in the games than any of the other tributes. So, like, it could have been any of the D6 tributes, any of the D5 tributes, D4, D2, D1, D3, any of those. But it was Jayadeen, and now you know. So, yeah, guys, again, that's the end of the video. I'm sorry that it was a long one, but hey, you guys are used to long ones now, because I've been posting longer videos now, which is great. But, yeah, that is the end of today's video, or, well, tonight's video, because it's nighttime now. But, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, stay awesome, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Bye.